I discovered that the most impractical way to cope with waiting for a Disney trip is to just book another Disney trip. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Disney Q&A. It's the series where you guys throw all sorts of Disney questions my way, whether it's about the parks or the movies or the history, and I try to answer them to the best of my ability. Now, before we kick off with this week's question, I want to share a couple of answers that I got from last week's question that I sent to you guys, which was, how do you cope with the wait between Disney trips, whether it's long or short? And we've got some pretty good answers here. For instance, we have Same Times, who says, I cope by watching videos like this and making those chain links that you take one off every day, going in 54 days. That's awesome. I haven't heard of that chain link thing, but that seems like a pretty cool idea. I'm assuming it's not something you wear around your neck, because once you get to, like, you know, I don't know, 50 days, it depends on how small the links are, then it starts to become a choker, and then it becomes dangerous. So it's probably just like a chain, right? We have Avo Akian, sorry if I mispronounced your name, who says, to cope with waiting for my Disney trips, I watch all the Disney vlogs I can. Well, I'm going to start trying to make all the Disney vlogs I can, so you'll have plenty of Disney vlogs to watch. And then finally, we have Techno Claus, who says, I always go shopping for Disney bounding while I wait. My friends, family, and I will decide on our favorite characters and get outfits prepared. We pack early and map out a game plan for the days to come. That seems like a really fun way to go about doing it. I went a really irresponsible route, and I couldn't wait all the way till January to go again, and so I ended up booking a last-minute trip to Disney. By the time you're watching this, I'll either be in Disney or I'll just be leaving Disney, and I'll probably have a video about it with Kat where we talk about the whole trip and what we're going to do, and I'm going to be doing plenty of vlogging while I'm down there, and hopefully it'll be a lot of fun, and you'll get a bunch of videos out of it. Obviously not the most practical way to cope, but it's one of them. With that said, let's jump into this week's question. First up, we have Dylan Wells, who says, I heard that in 2002, a Disneyana convention produced and sold 400 replica Tower of Terror models selling at $325 a model. What do you think are the chances of a collector like me getting my hands on one? Also, what would you do with this item? So I think what you're talking about is what's commonly referred to as the Tower of Terror Big Fig, as in big figure. And it is surprisingly not that big, but it's maybe like 9 or 10 inches, pretty heavy. It is a highly detailed model of the Disney's California Adventure version of the Tower of Terror. Apparently this is a pretty hot item. I was under the understanding from what I looked up that this was actually produced by Disney. It was actual Disney merch. It wasn't from like a fan convention. And that pricing sounds about right. When I was looking on eBay, I was able to find one for about $350. So they are hard to get their hands on, but you know, and they're kind of expensive, but it's not something that's impossible. So as far as your chances of collector like you getting your hands on one, you know, it really just depends on if you have that kind of money and you're willing to spend it on there. But you know, eBay seems to have them every once in a while, and you just got to be willing to jump on it when the opportunity comes. As for what I would do if I had the item, you know, I'd probably put it somewhere. I'd put it on a shelf or something. It's interesting. I almost wish they did more of that. And reading about the history of this when you had sent this question made me realize that there isn't a whole lot of not only memorabilia, but merchandise that is based on the buildings themselves. You know, Tower of Terror is an example that they use. They said there's not a lot of examples of merch with the Tower of Terror itself being used. A lot of the times it's stuff that's used within the lore. Bathrobes and the bells and the t-shirts and things like that, but rarely like a little physical model of the building. And it made me realize I would really love to see more of that. Now, I know there's certain things like there's castles, probably the most common one that you can find when you're in the parks, whether it's like a small scale model or, you know, Legos or something like that. You know, you've got the monorail. It's not completely unheard of that they do that, but not as much as I kind of wish they did. So here's what I'd say. If I could pick any building in all of Walt Disney World for there to be like a small scale model, maybe like this big, that I could put on a shelf somewhere, I think I'd want it to be Space Mountain. Either Space Mountain or maybe Astro Orbiter. That would be a pretty cool one. Maybe they exist and I just wasn't able to find them. My question for you this week What building would you want to see? Or maybe even if it already exists, which one do you want to put on your shelf somewhere? What's your favorite Walt Disney World building? Let me know in the comments below, or Disneyland. And, maybe I'll pick out a few for the next Q&A. Our next question comes from OBX Boats, who says, do you think that once Disney opens Star Wars Land in Disneyland, that they will move Star Tours closer to it? So if you know the layout of Disneyland, Star Wars Land is sort of going in the back left-ish corner, and Star Tours, of course, is in Tomorrowland, which is over to the right when you go up Main Street, and so they are kind of far. Personally, I don't know what they're planning to do. If I had to guess, I would say they probably wouldn't move it. I think for as great as Star Tours is, I don't know if it is great enough in the public's eye that it'd be worth the cost to close it down, break it down, move it all the way over, build it back up, and reopen it. Some people had suggested maybe they just close it. Maybe they assumed, Star Tours, one, there's a version in Disney World, which will be fine. Two, there'll be a whole land dedicated to Star Wars, so there'll be Star Wars rides, and so maybe you can close that and make room for a new attraction, which I wouldn't be opposed to. I love Star Tours, but, if we're getting an entire land dedicated to the movies, it's not going to hurt that much to lose the one ride. Or, they just accept that one Star Wars attraction sort of separate from Star Wars Land, and they just leave it open, But I think I'd be very surprised if it turned out that they actually closed it to move it over. Our next question comes from Colin's channel, who asks, are you excited for the new Frozen show in Disney's California Adventure? Do you think projecting most of it is a good decision? So if you haven't heard the news, a long time ago, Aladdin closed down. I think it was early in January, earlier this year. Aladdin was being performed at the Hyperion Theater over in Disney's California Adventure. They ended its run after, I think it was like 10 or 11 years for a Frozen show. And of course, a lot of people roll their eyes. There's a lot of sort of oversaturation of Frozen for Disney fans who are seeing it a lot. I am a little more optimistic about it, and maybe that's because I'm purposely not oversaturated. I've seen the movie about twice, maybe 3 times in my life. I don't hear Let It Go all the time. So when it comes to Frozen, I'm not like groaning and rolling my eyes and going, more Frozen. Like, I don't get a ton of it. That said, I looked up the show. You can find it on YouTube, people recording the show, and I think it's pretty cool. I really like the music in Frozen, so I like that they turned it into a musical. I love Aladdin, but I thought it was time to move on to something else. It's, any sort of show that runs for over a decade's got a pretty good run. In regards to your question about the projection technology they use, I think it's pretty cool. And granted, I'm biased. I come from a film background. I'm not really big into theater. I've only recently started to go to musicals and things like that on Broadway. So, I don't have this sort of roots, mentality of, needing to have all physical sets. There are physical sets in the Frozen show. It's not completely projected. There are props and things like that, but they do rely on projection for the backdrops, which I think one makes sense because from what I understand, they run that show a couple of times a day. And I feel like, resetting that could be a big hassle if you're talking about physical backdrops. So it might be easier to do projection, but also you could do some pretty cool stuff with it. For instance, when I was skipping around the video, I went to the Let It Go bit where they're making the Ice Palace, and they do some really cool projection technology mapping of animating the Ice Palace forming, and that's really awesome. And I think anything that adds to the effect and the immersion of a show should be, celebrated. Of course, you don't want to rely too much on it, and I think there is a balance to be had between physical props because it's a theater. that's sort of the whole point. Otherwise, you could just project the movie. But I think the show's fine. And you know what? Once I'm down there again, I will totally go see it. And I think I'll enjoy it because I liked Frozen. Sorry. Our next question comes from All Things Disney, who asks, would you be excited if something Disney like a mega Disney store or a Disney indoor theme park would open in New York? I'm presuming you mean New York City since that's where I live and that's why I would get excited. Probably not, because it would probably be really small for one. And secondly, I really like the atmosphere that is provided in Disney World and in Disneyland, being in California and Florida. It's sunny, it's clean, it's big open spaces. New York is very crowded and very dirty, and during a large part of the year, it's either too cold or too hot or just in between and gross and smelly. And, I love New York, but I don't think it's a great place for a Disney park, indoor or outdoor. As for the Mega Disney Store, I mean, New York City did have it. They had, a pretty large Disney store on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. I think a lot of younger Disney fans might not realize this, but in the 90s, the Disney decade, as Eisner called it, the Disney store was pretty common. There were a lot of them. You'd go to your average mall and there'd be a Disney store there. And I remember when I was young going to any mall you went to, at least in the New York tri-state area, there would be at least one Disney store, and you'd go in and they all had this similar vibe to them, and there were a lot of Disney merch, and you could, plan a trip while you were there. There was a lot you could do. Obviously, not many of them exist today. I think there are a few. I know Times Square in New York has a Disney store still. Now, if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the Disney stores and why they're not there anymore, there's this really good book called Disney War. It is about Michael Eisner's tenure as CEO of Disney. It covers all aspects of the business, the theme parks, the movies, the television, merchandising, and it sort of goes into how he sort of led this push to have Disney stores everywhere, and then it just didn't work out, and so they closed most of them. But it's a really interesting story. And then finally this week, our last question comes from Ewerts, who says, with Soarin' Around the World and Frozen Ever After opening around the same time, will the parks, minus Epcot, get less of an attendance? What are your opinion on these rides? So yeah, from what I've noticed, and the reason I've noticed it is because I'm actually going to the trip around the time these are opening. They're opening like within a matter of a week within each other. In fact, it's a bummer because we'll be in Disney when Soarin' Around the World opens back up. Good luck getting in line for that. But we'll be leaving the day before Frozen Ever After. And I do actually want to check out that ride, but we'll be gone by the time it opens. That said, do I think that there will be less attendance in the other parks due to that? That's a great question, and I'm actually really curious. I don't have an answer, but I would love to know the answer. And, some might assume, yeah, people are going to go flock to these rides, and so maybe you'll see a dip in attendance. I would suspect, though, considering that Frozen Ever After is a boat ride, and it isn't an omni-mover, and so the guest throughput isn't going to be as high as something like a Spaceship Earth, that you're not going to see as much of an effect. Soarin', that said, big theater. They have 3 theaters now. That's part of the expansion that they were doing. So there's going to be a lot more people going through. So I could almost see it having some sort of effect. It's going to be hard to measure though, right? Because it's the summertime and there are going to be a ton of people regardless. So even if there is a dip, it's not like the parks are going to be empty. You know what I mean? I'm really excited for Frozen Around the World, especially considering it's sort of a version of an idea I had of what to do with Soarin'. So it's sort of like the closest I'm ever going to get to see to one of my dream, ideas coming to fruition. Frozen Ever After, I'm more than happy to wait until January to check it out. I was one of the minority who was actually in favor of closing the Maelstrom and putting something else there, and I'm not against Frozen being there. So, I'm going in with no expectations, but no biases against it. And I'm always excited for new things at Disney because rarely do I walk away from a Disney attraction hating it or thinking that it wasn't as good as what was there before. And so, I'm excited to try new things. I would love to hear what you guys think about it. I mean, I know Frozen gets a lot of hate, so I'm sure a lot of people are not excited for it. What about Soarin' Over the World? And again, what building in Disney World or Disneyland or any of the Disneys would you want to have as a small scale model that you could go ahead and put on your shelf somewhere? Let me know in the comments below, or you can let me know on Twitter. If you have any other questions that you'd like me to answer in future Q&As, you can also let me know below, or you can also let me know on Twitter. I'm at RobPlays. I want to thank you all for watching. If you want to see more Q&As, more Disney vlogs, more Disney in general, there's going to be so much more Disney coming up. All you have to do is hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching. Have a great week. Whatever you're doing, make the most of it. And I'll see you next time for the next Disney Q&A. Bye, everybody.
Did you know that in the early 1990s, Disney had plans to open a theme park in Virginia all about America? The proposed park was called Disney's America, and it actually has an interesting history because it sort of came from not the failure but the hardships of another Disney park, Euro Disney.